Tennessee, so not so very far from there.
Yeah.
Similar.
Okay, Merlin, you'll just let me call.
Yeah, we'll just have a conversation here.
Okay.
I'm here with Dr. Alan Covich of Colorado State University, who's the current president of AIDS. I wanted to ask you about the meeting, what your goals were in setting up this meeting.
Well, the goals were to really stimulate some discussion across all the disciplines that AIBS represents, mostly organismic biology, integrative biology, to try to get people to synthesize. And I think in this day and age with so much specialization, what we're finding is there's a lot of not only habitat fragmentation, which causes problems for conservation biologists, but there's intellectual fragmentation that causes bigger problems in the future in terms of things not really coming together. So the goal was to stimulate some discussion, invite some outstanding scholars who would help us think about the future and get small group meetings together to really involve people in thinking ahead instead of thinking about just what's happening today and next week. And I think it's working. Yesterday was the first day. Today we had a fantastic morning, so I think that the idea is definitely taken hold.
How did you select the speakers for this meeting?
Well, it was kind of a big net of outreach and talking to a lot of people who have different backgrounds and having them suggest possible speakers for the plenaries. And that's, I think, one of the big advantages of the IBS is that we've got a large diversity of different groups and therefore a lot of different kinds of experts who are keyed into different communities within biology. And so it's usually not a problem finding good people. It's a matter of getting the list down to the ones, who can come the time that you have the meeting and the time that they can provide during preparation and so on and so forth. So I think that getting out a call to as many members as possible, spreading a big net, keep asking for suggestions, and then trying to narrow the list.
Can you talk just a moment about the ecologists? What ecologists are on this program?
Well, and depending on how you define ecology, I think they're all ecologists. I think that at one scale or another, from the microbes to the macrobes, I think ecology and evolution, as I see it, really come together. You can't separate the two. Often ecologists think in terms of ecological timescales, and so they tend not always to think in evolutionary time, but I think as we get into population ecology and population genetics, it becomes evolutionary biology. So I think the people certainly who have a very eminent kind of reputation in ecology would be people like Gene Likens, who talked yesterday in terms of ecosystem science and trying to make the point that ecosystems are really a way of approaching questions. They're conceptual ideas. They're not really something that exists in absolute kinds of terms, and that the boundaries of an ecosystem can only be defined when you have a question and you have something to measure and something to ask about. Whereas I think some of the kinds of things in terms of biodiversity issues that Professor Prance talked about, also major kinds of aspects of species richness in the tropics and which groups are more diverse under different geographic conditions and what the evolutionary background of that is, how it brings in modern human dimensions and the interactions with cultural dynamics. I'm sure that Dan Jansen will cover some similar ground, and certainly E.O. Wilson will bring a lot of those same points together. Lynn Margulis this morning, I think, did a beautiful job talking about the whole evolution of the Earth and the importance of the atmosphere and it being an end product of photosynthesis that really makes our planet different. And it's different because of the biology. And so there's some real ecology and evolution linkage in all the talks. And I think that was certainly one of our goals, was to remind ourselves and to stimulate the students and the teachers of biology and evolutionary biology in particular that right now is a crucial time for us to be educating this generation and the policymakers and the voters and people in general about what we do, why it's important, and what are some of the big ideas that are really current right now and where they're headed.
How does does AIBS work with policy decision-making and especially with our federal government?
Well, in 1947, Congress actually set up the charter for AIBS to serve as a source of information about biology. And we continue to fulfill that mission in doing reviews of different governmental projects, all sorts of things, everything from NASA to NSF to EPA and so on, all kinds of federal research initiatives that require expert review. So we do a lot of work coordinating members of AIBS and other scientists as well to serve on panels and review these kinds of proposals and projects. We have also a network then of individual scientists across the country who are willing to help out and serve in various kind of capacities as advisors, as reviewers on issues that come up, legislation, congressional hearings, and so on. We have some very explicit kinds of opportunities. We have a Congressional Visits Day that's coming up in early April, where people come to Washington and talk with congressmen and have displays. We have an exhibit day this year, I think it's May 17th, where we set up exhibits and booths and provide information primarily to congressional staff members. The other main way, and traditionally I think that AIBS has been effective there, is with publication of bioscience. And so every issue of bioscience that comes out once a month has a section on policy issues that we think are really important for our members and for people in the general community to be updated on and to stimulate their interest. So there's a whole variety of things. We have roundtables. We have discussions at the National Press Club to make information available to the media. We're trying to do more with a very small number of staff, and I think this is, I guess, the case for everyone these days. But we are also trying to set priorities in terms of some of the kinds of issues that we think we can deal with most effectively, given the expertise that we represent. There's 70 different societies. It's a broad range of interests, broad range of expertise, and so I think we are, in some ways, uniquely positioned to bridge these different fields. There are specialty societies that also have their own activities in terms of representing their particular groups. But we particularly emphasize the synthesis, and I think so this meeting, for example, is an illustration of that same kind of dynamic of bringing things together that otherwise might not be so obviously linked in the minds of policymakers. Things like ecosystem management is a hot topic now. The Endangered Species Act has been one of those things that we've continued to be interested in, teaching of evolution. These are kind of issues that in one form or another have been with us for decades, and I think that AIBS has always expressed some leadership in.
What are your goals for AIBS in your next year as president?
Well, we're trying to continue on some of the ideas that came from our President's Summit, which was a unique gathering of presidents of all the scientific societies that are members of AIBS, most of them. I think we got 67 representatives. And that generated a list of 11 topics that we want to follow up on. And we're meeting this weekend on Saturday and Sunday to prioritize within those 11, 3 or 4 that we can actually be moving ahead on this year. I think the follow-up from some of the ideas that are generated here at this meeting will also be very important, and they are clearly complementary. The aspects of biocomplexity are one of those ways, I think, of linking things that might sound not obviously connected, but which, when you start thinking conceptually about them, turn out to be really in need of each other, in need of integration. And so I think we're looking for themes that are broad enough to stress the diversity of the representation that we have, yet conceptually require some kind of unification, some kind of linkage. And so biocomplexity is the theme that we selected for 2001, for a year from now, as our annual meeting theme. And that will probably be preceded by a workshop or two to gather people together to further define exactly how to develop that theme.
And just one last final question, and I'm going to ask you to just start with the best. What was the best moment of the meeting for you?
Well, I think it was this morning. The two plenary talks that we had from Marvelly Wake and Lynn Margulis came together in a beautiful way that I had hoped might happen, but I never expected to be that good. I mean, it was just spectacular in terms of the amount of coverage that they were able to include, literally from the origin of life, up until historic times in terms of the big ideas. I mean, this morning we talked about the most important things in biology that you could imagine in a very well-illustrated, very cogent, clear fashion. And I think everyone in that auditorium was really excited. I can't imagine anyone could have listened to those two speakers and not come away really excited. So I think that we all shared that enthusiasm.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
Sure.